Well, legally, the choice is the owner's, not the owner union. So the owner of
Oh,
that
okay.
particular unit gets to decide how they want to rent it out for how long as, again,
Okay.
it's done for a minimum of 1 month and with the lease in place, there's nothing
Okay.
the owner union or building management
Oh,
company can legally do about it. But that
okay.
doesn't mean that they like it. So some particular owner unions, especially in buildings that are owned almost entirely by investors as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
owners occupiers. So
Mm-hmm.
those are typically the older, smaller studio or one-bedroom apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are okay with it because everyone else is doing the same thing in the building, either long-term or medium-term rentals. But the ones that are not, they can't prohibit it legally, but they can definitely make life very hard for the property
Mm.
manager trying to service the apartment as well as for the
Yeah.
guests. I mean, the
Yeah.
last thing you want is people knocking on the doors 3, 4 times a day. Are you sure you're not renting it, Minpaku, right? So
Yeah.
it's they can make life challenging. Most of the property managers that we work with, even if they do monthly rentals, once
Mm.
they face any resistance from the owner, they're just going to say, "No, we just can't manage this one." Hi there, folks, and welcome back to Nippon Trading International's Japan Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Ziv Nakajima again, and this podcast is brought to you, among others, by Emil Gorgis of realestate.jp. He's a Tokyo real estate agent who specializes in serving international or mixed nationality families who are looking for the perfect family home. So Emil's an Australian. He's been living here in Japan for over 2 decades now, and for about half of that time, he's been buying, selling, and managing real estate properties in Tokyo on behalf of his own family and a great many happy clients. And he also acts as a mortgage broker on behalf of his clients. So he's got dedicated loan officers in many of the Japanese mega banks. And if you're a regular listener of the podcast, you probably already know him from our JREP, the Japan Real Estate Experts Panel sessions, which means that you're already aware of the fact that the man is an absolute fountain of wisdom on all things related to real estate in Japan, and in particular to family homes, the greater Tokyo metropolitan area, and mortgages. And most importantly, he's incredibly generous with his time and advice, which he's more than happy to provide at no cost or commitment to anyone asking. So if you've been thinking about buying your home in Tokyo, but you've been sitting on the fence for a while, or you just want to have a chat in English with a real expert, drop him a line on sales@realestate.jp. Hit him up today and start exploring your options. All right, so first off, an official announcement. Early bird pre-registration tickets for the next Japan Real Estate Summit, which will take place on the weekend of 12 and 13 April, which is less than 3 months away as of the date of publication of this episode, are now officially open. We'll link to the registration form in this episode's show notes, or you can just hop over to our website, nippontradings.com. That's NIPPON, Nippon Tradings with an S, all one word, .com. And find the link at the very top of our homepage. If you know you'll be in Tokyo the second weekend of April and are listening to this podcast, I know you'll get right on it. If you're considering your travel plans, make sure they coincide with the event. You will not regret it. And even if you're not, streaming tickets are also discounted for early bird registrants. So hop over there, secure your spot today. As always, the early bird tickets will only be available until we have all final details such as venue, catering, etc. hammered out. And that will be in a few weeks' time at most. So if you know you're coming, there's no reason not to secure your spot today. We've usually only got about 100 seats in total on each of those days. Tickets can and regularly do run out, and they're cheaper too, so why the hell not do it ahead of time? If you haven't been to one of our summits yet, we'll also link to these previous event pages, videos, photos, slide decks in this episode's show notes and on our website. Go check them out. It's really a no-brainer if you're even remotely interested in this market, which if you're listening to this podcast, we can probably assume you are. All right, so right before we get into today's episode, as you know, if you're one of our clients, even though we've been officially off for the winter holidays, we, that is to say, Chikako and I, were actually working all throughout that period, regardless of the fact that our email autoresponder might have informed people otherwise. So while we did get to sleep in a fair bit, we didn't really get a chance to have a real holiday. Fortunately for me at least, and don't worry, Chikako has hers coming up too, I've managed to find a fabulous conference that I'll be heading to in Chiang Mai, Thailand, a city that I've been dying to visit for a while. The conference is starting this weekend, 16 January, and will go on for about a week. I'll then stay there for another couple of weeks just to let my hair down a bit, as much as I have left of it. Even though I'm still going to be working anyway, of course, the curse and blessing of business owners is that while we can take more holidays than company employees, at least on paper, and we do have the flexibility to decide when we'll be taking those, we also are never really on holiday. But what it does mean is that I probably won't be publishing too many podcast episodes in the next 3 weeks. Apologies in advance. I always tell myself that I'll try to, even while away, and never seem to actually do it. So that's probably going to be the case this time around as well. We'll see, but in case I will be on radio silence for a few weeks, please accept my apologies in advance. Now, as for the conference itself, in case you're interested, it's a global digital nomad summit. And while I'm not really a digital nomad myself, NTI, our company, does cater to digital nomads seeking housing in Japan in various formats. And my other company, Nippon Bridge, caters to them on even more fronts, as we also assist them with rentals, signing up for various services, setting up their business entities here in the land of the rising sun. And that brings me right to the topic of this episode. If you've been at our last Japan Real Estate Summit, whether in person or via the stream back in October 2024, or if you watched the recordings at some point after the event, you've probably had the pleasure of seeing Nick Woy, founder and owner of Japan Remotely, which specializes in assisting people plan for and execute their move to Japan. He gave a fantastic, funny, and insightful presentation on some very creative strategies for renting or purchasing office space when setting up a company and moving here. And we will link to that presentation again in this episode show notes, as well as to his website. Now, Nick knows digital nomads and remote workers even better than we do, since they're a large section of his existing and potential clientele. He's already been here on the podcast on a few occasions, discussing various topics like visas, immigration, home purchases, rentals, etc. And he's now come up with a new and exciting new venture, which will see Japan Remotely actually purchasing properties to rent out on a monthly or yearly basis to digital nomads who are traveling to and staying in Japan. And so we discuss his business plan and model, how monthly stays work in Japan, and where they'd be easier or harder to manage from a landlord's perspective, what types of properties and locations might work best for this purpose, with a special focus on Fukuoka City, where our offices are located and where I live. The city's increasing reputation as a destination for digital nomads, its startup hub positioning and how that's working out, various attractive locations within the city itself, as well as in Itoshima City, which is a 30-minute train ride west of Fukuoka and is also hugely popular, although with a very different vibe to it. Generally put a bit more flash together on the bones of that business plan of his, so to speak. Really exciting stuff, I think, and a much needed service that he'd be wise to provide and we'd be happy to play a part in. We also look at a map of the area together, so if you're interested in that and you're just listening in on the audio version, feel free to hop over to our YouTube channel instead and view it there. So enjoy the conversation, and I'll see you again on the other side. Awesome. Long time no see. Well, since our summit, not that long.
Yeah, been about a month and a half or so. Yeah, that
Yeah.
was really great. Thanks for having me. It was a fantastic
Thanks
experience.
for
And
energizing the room, man. The whole head and shoulder thing is going to go down in history. That was brilliant.
yeah, I when I saw that I was last, I was like, oh man, we gotta shake these guys up a little bit.
Fantastic. Okay, but
But
today you
it
wanted to
was
talk.
very inspiring too to
Sure.
be at that summit and hearing about all the possibilities of real estate. And I feel like that's the natural next direction for Japan Remotely too. At Japan Remotely, we primarily offer advice about how it works to live in Japan and what are the options for medium stays or even further long stays. How does it work to get a long-term visa and what can you do to get one? And that's been going really well, and I'm really happy with how the business has gone this year. Um, but I feel like the next step could very well be, okay, here's a way you can stay for a midterm amount of time. Here's some ideas about how you could stay long term. Um, and targeting that same group of people, saying, here are some options for you to stay for a longer period of time. Um, I've been active on the Japan Digital Nomad Association Discord, and that's a really common complaint amongst people who are thinking of spending 6 months in Japan is that there's just nowhere to stay for that length amount of time that amount of time. Of course, Tokyo's has a bit more options, but even then, they have places like Oak House, which are furnished apartments, um, but those can get, very expensive. Um, and so I feel like
There's
with
guest
Japan,
houses and share houses, but I guess that's a very different atmosphere, especially if you're
yeah,
coming with family, right?
yeah, family, and I'd really like to target people whose primary goal is to work remotely and to find, and also people who want to find a method to continue working in Japan, potentially using their income from abroad. So I feel like this group that I'm targeting with Japan remotely, they are some of the same people that are looking for housing in Japan for months at a time.
Right. So your plan was to be a foreigner-friendly, medium-term stay operator.
That's my idea. What do you think?
I love it. I love it.
Oh,
And
awesome.
obviously there's a need for it, as you well know from the feedback you've been getting, but as we hear people
Yeah.
complaining for decades,
Okay.
it's a lot more challenging. I mean, there are some solutions for non-resident foreigners, but they usually involve signing up for a year and paying for a
Yeah.
year in advance,
Hmm.
which is not something that everyone's able to do, and definitely not something everybody wants to do. Some people, like you said, just want to be here a few months at a time, right? So
Yeah.
that leaves them with typical Japanese monthly mansion, like monthly
Yeah.
rentals.
Hmm.
But those are not that easy to get into,
Yeah.
surprisingly, as a foreigner. A lot of the websites and the platforms are strictly Japanese, right?
That's right. And the other, speaking of like Japanese culture and different things you have to look out for when starting a rental in Japan, is at the summit, I learned a lot about minpaku laws. And one of another reason why I was thinking about monthly rentals is that from what I understood Tracy talking about, is that you might not need to have a minpaku license to rent by the month.
You will
Or,
not yet. As long as it's
oh,
done for a
really?
month
Okay.
or with a lease in place, and a lease can be a
Okay.
single page kind of template document,
Okay.
then it's just a normal rental and it's nobody's business. Yeah.
Okay. Um, I know that a lot of I'm struggling to find the word in English, mansion, but like
Yeah.
condo buildings, um, they also have rules about length of stays that you can uh, lend to people, and it just depends on the building. Um, have you seen situations where they're okay with monthly contracts, or do they typically require like a year or 6 month type of lease to be able to utilize a condo space?
Well, legally, the choice is the owner's, not the owner union. So the owner of
Oh,
that
okay.
particular unit gets to decide how they want to rent it out for how long. As long as, again,
Okay.
it's done for a minimum of 1 month and with the lease in place, there's nothing
Okay.
the owner union or building management
Oh,
company can legally do about it. But that
okay.
doesn't mean that they like it. So some particular owner unions, especially in buildings that are owned almost entirely by investors as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
owners occupiers. So
Mm-hmm.
those are typically the older, smaller studio or one-bedroom apartments.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are okay with it because, everyone else is doing the same thing in the building, either long-term or medium-term rentals. But the ones that are not, they can't prohibit it legally, but they can definitely make life very hard for the property
Mm-hmm.
manager trying to service the apartment as well as for the
Yeah.
guests. I mean, the
Yeah.
last thing you want is people knocking on the doors 3, 4 times a day. Are you sure you're not renting it, Minpaku, right? So
Yeah.
it's they can make life challenging. Most of the property managers that we work with, even if they do monthly rentals, once
Mm-hmm.
they face any resistance from the owner, they're just going to say, "No, we just can't manage this one."
Yeah.
So if you could
I
own the
see.
entire building, that would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting line of thought too. I was really inspired by Alicia's presentation at the summit as well, where she talked about buying an apartment building where she would put down something like 40% and then through her Japanese entity was able to get funding for the rest of it. Um, have you guys experienced that down in Fukuoka? Have you had clients that have been able to get funding through their entity?
Our clients have not done that yet. We've got a couple of them
Okay.
applying now, but they've been applying for a
Okay.
while now. I'm waiting for that to be
Oh yeah.
finalized.
Okay.
But for that amount, for the 400,000, I mean, Alicia's lenders tend to focus on loans that are about a million US and above.
Yeah.
So if you're putting down 400,000 US or slightly more, slightly
Hmm.
less anyway, you could buy an entire small wooden multi-unit family building of, similar units or maybe less units if they're bigger or wider in size, depending on the
Okay.
building, not in the smack in the center of a big city, but definitely in the
Yeah.
suburbs of it. Um, I want to say Tokyo notwithstanding, but we actually had a client who purchased uh, I call it a duplex, but it's an apartment
Hmm.
building with one apartment per floor. There's two
Oh
of
yeah.
those, and he purchased that for 32 million yen. And it was
Wow.
up to all of our criteria. Like it was constructed in the last 20 years within 10 minutes to a station, like everything that we
That's a
normally
great
evaluate.
find.
Yes, there's not many of them though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you've attended any of our recent JREP Summit events in Tokyo or online, you've probably heard our sponsor, Robert Miller from Innovatious.com. He's been in web solutions here in Japan for the past 25 years, and he's also an active investor in Japanese real estate property, as well as global online property, which is his specialty and what his company Innovatious is all about. They offer a full suite of website services for entrepreneurs and small business owners, including all aspects of web design and management, backup and updates, content formatting and editing, proactive maintenance and error fixing, you name it, with a strong focus on SEO excellence, which is what gets you those hardcore top of the list search engine rankings. But there is a difference. Innovations works off a simple, all inclusive monthly subscription model as opposed to the typical outdated and confusing project model. So you never have to wonder how much any request for any work to be done on your website might cost. It's always $497 per month. And if that's not enough, if you've mentioned you've heard of their services on the Japan Real Estate Podcast, you'll also get 10% off this monthly price for life. Also, and equally important, if not more, you can try out Innovations for just 1 month, then switch them off, on again later if you want, and so forth. There are no minimum subscription terms. Now, if you're a small business owner, managing and growing a website is super distracting and time consuming, right? That's exactly where Innovations comes in. Robert's team takes care of all of that for you so that you can focus on what you do best. So feel free to email Rob on robert@innovations.com, and his team will conduct a full SEO and website audit on your site, reveal anything that you should address to increase your website's appeal, and provide you with an easy to read detailed report with your own branding so that you can make some informed decisions on your online strategy and watch your business grow as you implement it. So once more, robert@innovations.com. Drop him a line and get your website reviewed today.
I see. So speaking of locations, I was thinking partially because of my budget to stay outside of Tokyo.
Yep.
Um, I'd like to keep it under 20 million yen, um, for this initial project because that's how much cash I have.
Yeah.
Um, and it would be cool if there was a lender that would take a down payment that small, but sounds like probably not.
Well, from Alicia's presentation, the other thing that mentioned, and I think that resonates with what some of the other lenders that I've spoken to in the past, is that
Mhm.
vast majority of them will not consider monthly rentals as a valid
Oh, that's right.
investment loan. So they want to see long-term rentals. It's
Hmm.
not that they can enforce it. So once you get the loan,
Hmm.
you
could potentially convert it to whatever you want. But if and when they do find out, they would be within their rights to then withdraw the loan and ask you to pay it off, or ask you to convert it to something else, or ask you to sell and pay it back, or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I mean it's a remote option, but it could happen, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so it sounds like we should stick within the cash budget, and that's why I was looking at alternative cities to Tokyo,
So
especially
that's gonna be
ones,
20 million is not gonna be a small building. That's gonna be a condo unit or a house.
yeah, that's what I was, that too
Yeah.
is staying away from the whole building, but potentially starting small with a condo unit or a house that potentially has either some great location or maybe some character to the house. I'm open at this point. From a high level, I feel like I want to do what would be most attractive for the clients that I'm looking at.
Well, you know your
And
guest profile better than I do. How far from a major city center would they consider staying?
so I have a couple of ideas there. One is I was looking around the Kobe region and thinking maybe going as far out as like Akashi or Himeji. Around the Himeji city, there's some really beautiful buildings.
Oh,
So I was looking at Kobe, and of course Kobe city center is fairly expensive. Um, but as I looked further down the train line in places like Akashi or down in Himeji, um, prices are lower, and especially around the Himeji area, I feel like the construction is very unique to Japan. Like has those traditional roofs, and some of the houses were really cool. I was just looking on AkiyaMart to see some ideas. Another place that's potentially far from a city center, but could be interesting to foreigners that are kind of interested in a work/workation kind of situation is Odawara Station outside of Tokyo,
yep.
because Odawara Station has a direct train line to Shinjuku that can get you there in like an hour and 15 minutes. And then it also has the Shinkansen line, which can get you into Shinagawa in like 30 minutes. So potentially, if someone were in a situation where most of the time they're working remotely, but they wanted to scoot into Tokyo to do, some informational interviews or talking to potential partners, that could be really fast in there. Um, but personally, this next phase of Japan remotely doing more business in Japan and hopefully making a Japanese entity is also part of my plan to be a Japan remotely customer myself eventually and plan my own relocation back to Japan on my terms. Um, and the place I've been really interested in living is something that you are very much an expert of is Fukuoka.
Yeah, baby.
So, what do you like about Fukuoka? Is it a place that I should plan personally to think about living? Would you recommend it?
Well, I'll tell you first, the only thing I don't like about Fukuoka in your scenario is that there are no direct
Mhm.
flights from the US, right?
Yeah.
So you and your clientele will have to lug yourselves over from Osaka or Tokyo.
Oh, there's none from Hawaii? Really?
Oh, there may be. I know there was, and then they stopped
Okay.
it during COVID. Maybe it's back now.
Let's see.
That would be interesting. But I mean, for most
But
US
there's still going to be
residents,
a
to get
hop.
to get
Yeah.
to Hawaii is also a thing, right?
Yeah. Two.
But
Yeah, it's
aside from
definitely
that, there is.
sorry, I was just gonna say it's definitely not Tokyo. It's
No.
it's not as connected.
Book now
There's a nonstop
experience.
to Honolulu
Yeah,
now,
Hawaiian Airlines, direct flights between Fukuoka and Honolulu. You're right.
and they've got JAL too.
Gel too. Okay.
Okay.
So as long as that's not restrictive, then
Hmm.
Fukuoka, in my perspective, is the best for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, depending on what you're looking for. If somebody is looking to set up a business and do heavy business networking and meet with potential partners, there's no substitute for Tokyo, right?
Yeah.
That depends on your clientele. But for everybody else that you've described, it's a big city. It's 1.7 million people and growing by the
Hmm.
day. It's one of the only places that's growing organically in Japan, like people actually having babies, not just moving in. Um, it's
Yeah,
got
I've
a
heard
much
some
young.
stories about there's beautiful women in Fukuoka. Maybe that's part of the reason the population's
I
going
can't
up.
comment on that, but I have heard that from quite a few sources as well. And they're a lot younger, not just the women. I mean,
Okay.
everyone is a lot younger here. You see just young faces on the train, on the street. The female to male ratio that could be advantage or disadvantage depending on who you are, and is about 65 or 70% women to men.
Wow.
There's a bunch of reasons for that, mainly being that a lot of the husbands get relocated to company
Hmm.
headquarters in Tokyo and Osaka, but then the
I
family
see.
stays in Fukuoka because it's a very family friendly city. So we got
Okay.
beaches, like real beaches, not like gray, pebbly concrete beaches,
Yeah.
like actual sandy beaches and parks and bicycle paths everywhere. Everything is walkable or at least cyclable, including the shopping areas, including where you might want to go out for nightlife. And nature, whether it's south toward onsens and volcanoes and mountains, or west towards more beaches, is everywhere, right? Like a hop and a skip from the city, and you're deep in nature, or on beachside galleries and cafes and oyster huts, depending on which way you go. It's great. And the foreigner community is much smaller, but very close knit here. A lot of people know each other.
Okay. So speaking of the foreigner community, yeah, I'm aware that Fukuoka was the first to offer the startup visa in Japan, and they are trying to become uh, kind of like the bridge between Japan and the rest of Asia for business development.
Yep.
Have you seen, is that real? Do you see that there's a lot of opportunity to be had in Fukuoka for people coming for business?
The attempts are real. The
Okay.
policies are in place, and they're definitely interested in doing it. In practice, there's still a lot to be desired.
Hmm.
The facilities seem to be focused a lot more on Japanese startups than foreign startups. And when they
Hmm.
do consider the foreign startups for government support or grants or to be
Hmm.
involved in projects, whatever the case may be, then they kind of focus on the sexy tech projects. So
Hmm.
just the fact that you have a business and you want to start it in Fukuoka is not necessarily going to get you through the door.
Okay.
It's a low cost compared to Tokyo, Osaka, and definitely
Hmm.
compared to Tokyo, it's low cost. So it's very attractive for
Hmm.
people who are bootstrapping their startups here. Everything is about
What
30%
would you
cheaper.
say is low cost about
About
Fukuoka? I
30%
was
cheaper than Tokyo, most things.
most things. Okay.
Overall, yeah. I mean, transportation might be a bit more expensive. We have a less
Hmm.
advanced train system, but most things are about 30% cheaper. Definitely rents and the prices of properties are a lot cheaper.
Okay.
And yeah, it's got a very casual vibe to it, which I like as well. Tokyo can be a bit busy and overwhelming for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I don't want to do Tokyo again. I've done it before. Another reason that personally I'm interested in living in Fukuoka is the airport that's so central to the city and connected to the rest of Asia.
Everywhere in Asia, yeah, it's amazing. Like if I'm looking for a cheap holiday, I don't even look within Japan. I just immediately look for cheap Asian flights from Fukuoka Airport.
Yeah. I remember when I was living in Japan as a worker. Of course, Tokyo's very well connected and you could go, but number one, I didn't have very much time to go anywhere. And number two, it just seemed like such a big hassle to get to the airport and go there and go through all the stuff.
That's another point. We haven't even mentioned that, but the airport is about 20 minutes commute from anywhere in the city, right? It's a few
Yeah.
stops on the subway.
Yeah, that's cool.
We interrupt this broadcast to tell you about Tokyo Family Stays. They're a short-term rentals company in Tokyo, and they offer a home away from home experience, which is just perfect for remote working, quarantining, if that's still a thing, or if you just need somewhere quiet to get away from the world. They offer a variety of options for families, corporate relocations, or even if you're simply transitioning between homes in Tokyo. The properties are super comfortable, tastefully furnished, fully equipped with all amenities, and they accommodate up to 10 people. So really the only thing you'll need to bring with you is your toothbrush and maybe a change of clothes. They come with fast unlimited wireless internet, dedicated workspaces, and fully equipped kitchens, and they're just a delight to stay in. Fantastic alternative to Japanese business hotels, which if you've ever stayed in one, you probably know they're tiny, they're noisy, fine for a night or two if you're on your own, but longer term or with a family, you'll probably feel you're in a jail cell very quickly in a Japanese business hotel. So if you want to give yourself a sense of space and freedom by renting a real home, with comfortable Western beds, including all the necessities like baby bedding, children's toys, high chairs, etc., you definitely want to reach out to Tokyo Family Stays. They've been at it for over a decade. They're a fully licensed minpaku or short-term stay operator. And as a special bonus for our viewers and listeners, they're also throwing in a breakfast basket upon arrival for anyone who books and mentions the Japan Real Estate Podcast or NTI. And not only for guests, if you're a property owner, you've got an investment property that you want to tweak for higher profit, or a holiday home that you want to rent out when you're not using it via short-term stays, drop them a line today, see how they can help you maximize your property's income. And again, as a special bonus to our viewers and listeners, they're also offering a free audit of your existing short-term stay listings without any obligation whatsoever. So feel free to reach out to them at tokyofamilystays.com. Well worth a visit. And again, if you're in the market for a family home in or around the Tokyo metropolitan area, Emil's your man. Don't be shy to reach out to him as well at sales@realestate.jp. And now, back to the podcast.
So that's definitely one of the locations I want to look at. One concern that I had that you also brought up is just looking on AkiyaMart and researching those houses that are available there. There's definitely not so many train lines that you can choose from. And so for customers that don't have a car, we have a limited amount of space to work with.
Yes, but those train lines go far and long out of the city.
Okay.
So within 35, 40 minutes to the city center, you're going to be officially out of Fukuoka City. You're going to be in Itoshima if you're going west, or maybe closer to Kitakyushu if you're going east. But they're still on the single train line that will eventually get you to central Fukuoka and even to the airport, depending on which direction you're coming from.
So I have no idea. I know a lot about Tokyo suburbs, and I know some about Kansai suburbs. I know nothing about Fukuoka suburbs and surroundings.
It's a lot easier to learn. We can, if we're going to focus on Fukuoka, I can share my screen and show the map.
Okay, sure.
Give me a sec. It's definitely a lot easier to navigate and understand than Tokyo or Osaka for that matter. Where's my map? Here we are. If I go to Fukuoka City,
there we go.
Let me just move our lovely faces out of the way.
Okay.
So this is the city itself, officially.
Yeah.
When you drill down, this big concrete jungle here in the center is Hakata Station.
Oh, okay.
That's the main transport hub. That's where the Shinkansen stops. And that's where you can get buses and trains and subway to all other parts of the city.
Okay.
Up here is where the airport is. Where's the airport? Not too far from Hakata Station. This is where the airport is. Oh, we lost Hakata again, didn't we? Yeah. Here is Hakata Station around here, and this is where the airport is, right?
Yeah.
So again, 2 stations on the subway from here to there. And down here is Tenjin, which is the city's shopping/nightlife center, and it branches out a couple of stations this way and that.
Okay.
So the places I'm talking about, and this is another major spot here, is Ohori Park. It's the city's main
Mm-hmm.
Fukuoka Art Museum, and the city's main green lung is
Oh,
here.
okay.
And then right next to it is another area called Nishijin, which is more alternative, younger city center. So here, you're actually
Okay.
seeing teenagers and 20-year-olds walk down the street most of the time.
Okay. So kind of
So
like,
anywhere within this area, all the way from Nishijin to Hakata Station,
hmm
Hakata Station down here, is going
yeah,
to be quite expensive, right?
yeah.
But if we look down along this subway line,
hmm
from Fujisaki and onwards,
hmm
all the way up to Meinohama, which is still Fukuoka City, and a couple of stations down,
hmm
which is still Fukuoka City, but you can see it's
hmm
getting to be more beachy,
hmm
is going to be still within, if I take, for example, uh, let's take Susenji Station. That's already, I think, officially out of Fukuoka. No, still within Fukuoka City. That's going to be a fairly cheap area to buy, and if you find exciting houses there,
hmm
and
That's
airport.
kind of cool. The university is close by too, so potentially, visiting professors or something like that could
Yep.
uh,
Right. So see, even this is
utilize
less
that
than 40
space.
minutes by
Yeah.
train, right, to the airport. Similar if you go towards the east, let's say we're going
hmm
towards Kitakyushu.
So the vibe of Itoshima, you mentioned beachy, laid back. Is that my understanding correct?
Itoshima is amazing. It's been voted by which magazine? Monocle magazine, I think. It was voted world's favorite small city or third
Oh
place
wow.
small city in the world. It's all
Wow.
galleries and cafes, walks by the beach, beautiful mansions in the mountain if you can afford them. But you want to have a car if you're in Itoshima, unless
Yeah.
you happen to buy right next to a train station. It's not very
hmm
commutable otherwise.
Okay. Got
Yeah.
it.
And similar to the east, towards Kitakyushu, all the stations between Hakata and
Okay.
Kitakyushu are
I think I
places
lost
which
your
will
your
be
screen though.
which will be up to 40 minutes from the airport and still would be a lot cheaper to buy. So everything between,
So I heard you mention, I know that the uh, Joey and Take bought a house in Kitakyushu recently for a very, very low price. And your comment was like, well, Kitakyushu is very industrial, and that's why it was cheap. Um,
industrial, declining in population, home to some of Japan's most famous gangsters. There's a bunch of reasons there. Yeah.
so maybe not all the way up to Kitakyushu then for
Yes.
our clientele.
But this area, by the way, this area is gorgeous. You're already getting into an hour plus territory to Fukuoka, but
Yeah, I've heard
beautiful place,
Shimonoseki is great.
beautiful beaches. The bridge crossing over to Honshu is wonderful. It's a
hmm
great place. And south,
Okay.
all the way to Kurume, that's also up to an hour from Fukuoka City. So
Okay.
all of the train lines around here, the train stations around here,
Yeah. My
those
wife
will be.
used to be a tour provider for doing custom tours, and she sent a lot of people to Kurume.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most exciting place to
hmm
live, but it's convenient enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks better towards the west, towards Itoshima and Karatsu, but it's very convenient.
Okay.
So those are all do, but are we focusing on houses? Because you mentioned houses a few times now.
So, I mean, I just mentioned house, but I'm also open to condominiums now that we know that potentially it would work for monthly rentals. I guess it would depend on
We'd
if
have to pick
we
them. We'd have to
would,
find the condominiums where the owner unions would actually potentially be okay with it. Otherwise, the
yeah,
management companies are not going to want to manage it, or at least not the good management companies.
yeah.
But are you going to be handling all of these? Because you're going to have foreign guests. Are you going to be handling the
hmm
bookings and marketing and check-ins and checkouts, all of that on your own, or just via, I don't know, Japan remotely clients that you'll be handling directly, or are you actually planning to list it on the market for short-term, for medium-term stays?
That's a good question. I'm totally new to this, so I'm not sure how it's going to work, if I'm honest.
Well, the reason I'm asking in is if you're going to be here in person, handling check-ins, check-outs, and bookings,
Oh, you mean personally? No,
and
no,
you
I
maybe
wouldn't be.
don't need a property manager.
Yeah, I wouldn't be doing it myself. So I would need somebody to be the on-site person to help just in case.
Okay, so if we need a management company and if it's going to be a condo unit, we'll have to first inquire with the owner union to see
Hmm.
if they're open to that.
Um, I was looking on AkiyaMart again at the different um at first I was only thinking houses because I didn't think that condos would work. Um, would you say that within uh that buying a condo unit would allow me to get closer to the center of the city?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Okay.
Location would be better for the same price. You'll get a much more central location because,
Okay.
I mean, house means land. If you want to buy a house
Yeah.
close to the center of the city, that's obviously going to cost a lot more.
Yeah. And we've talked before about the issue of maintenance as well. And you've expressed that it's easier to conduct maintenance on a condo unit because there's so many less variables, like what happens to the trees outside or who does the lawn or
Structural, there's no concern of structural
yes,
issues in it. Yeah.
no structural issues. So it could be that for a person who's never done any property ownership besides my own house, um, that a condo might be an easier first step than buying a house. Is that fair to say?
Yes, if we can get one where we'd be able to pull off, because the monthly management plan is
Hmm.
already out of the box, right? The typical condo
Yeah.
unit buyer is going to be renting them out
Hmm.
long term and not, not having
Hmm.
to be hands-on at all. And that's the closest thing to passive income that there is. You're
Hmm.
already going to be a lot more hands-on.
Hmm.
So definitely it would be easier to manage with a condo unit. But that's again, if we manage to find one that'll be open to a monthly rental situation. And those tend to be smaller studio slash one bedroom type units. So I'm wondering if that is your typical clientele, singles, couples, families.
Now, here's some big news for anyone interested in Akiya, the abandoned vacant homes that are abundant all around Japan for very attractive purchase prices. AkiyaMart, our latest sponsor, is a recently founded online search and discovery tool for Japanese real estate. Its user interface will be very familiar to users of Zillow or Redfin. The platform essentially scouts the internet for property listings, translates them into English, and displays prices in US dollars, all in one place and with a dynamic map interface that makes browsing, finding, and shortlisting your favorite properties a piece of cake. Which any of you who have been struggling with the dozens, if not hundreds, of Japanese property websites that are available online and their very clunky interface will probably find a real blessing. They've got already over 500,000 listings on the platform, and the database is expanding daily. Ranging from abandoned rural homes to luxury urban properties, AkiyaMart makes it easy to find your dream home in Japan, regardless of your budget. Now, while the platform is essentially free for use, here's an exclusive offer for listeners of the podcast. You can use the promo code NTI to receive $5 off AkiyaMart Pro. The subscription will unlock a bunch of very attractive features for you, including unrestricted access to the entire nationwide property database and a whole range of filters, which will help power charge your search for that elusive perfect home and make it even easier. So hop over to akiya-mart.com, that's AKIYA-MART, akiya-mart.com, and kick off your search today.
I feel like it would be good to have a bedroom, a kitchen area, and a separated office. I feel like that would be attractive to my clientele so that they can have, that separation where they really can focus on work and then leave that space and uh, do things in the kitchen or living and then have their space for sleeping. So I feel
That's gonna
like a
be
2L.
more challenging to find the
Okay.
owner union in a building like that with those size
Okay.
units that would consider that. We can definitely start that way and try, and then if not,
Okay.
maybe switch to smaller condo units or to houses.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
20 million will buy you a house in a reasonably good condition as long as it's not super central.
Hmm.
But again, yes, annual maintenance, renovation, they're just even if they're on par with what you'd be paying in a condo. In a condo, you're paying your fixed monthly fee, and
Hmm.
you can plan for that. With a house, it's going to
Yeah.
be whatever goes next, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, well, I think let's do a search for Fukuoka, and we can talk over email about those different criteria. I sent you a little document that shows what kind of places I'm interested in, and kind of the strategy that I had for those monthly rentals. Um, Besides Fukuoka, I mentioned I'm also interested in Kobe area. There's a couple reasons. Um, I live in Washington State in the United States, and I found out that Hyogo Prefecture is the sister state of Washington,
Okay,
and also that Kobe City is the sister city of Seattle.
right.
Um, and so potentially, uh, there could be some connection there that, in my head, maybe start to funnel people from, Amazon, Microsoft, Boeing, that are interested in maybe starting a life in Japan and thinking where should they look first, and they go to the sister city or state program and say, I have this idea, and they say, oh, well, here's, Japan remotely. You can get advice, and you can also go to Japan and have a stay in our sister state for to try it out. In my head, maybe that could be a good connection to leverage, as well as those government uh, connections that, those sister state and city programs have.
I agree on the US side. I'm not sure you'll have much cooperation on the Japanese sister city side, but give it a shot.
Yeah. But that's one consideration for why Kobe. Have you heard anything about people who Kobe is another one of the startup
It's
areas in
very popular
Japan.
with foreigners. Everyone I know who
Hmm.
lives there loves the city. So quite similar to
Hmm.
Fukuoka in kind of,
Hmm.
I don't know, city satisfaction scale.
Yeah.
Um, but I found out recently, and I was surprised to find out that Kobe is actually declining in population, or at least stagnant. I was expecting
Yeah.
it to be as as popular and growth oriented as Osaka, but apparently it's not, or at least it hasn't been until 2020. COVID might have changed that a bit, but
Mm.
until 2020, it was not increasing in population. Not
At
a concern
least,
for you because your guest
yeah,
profile is not really related to Japanese population as it is, but just something.
yeah, yeah. I can kind of, I guess, overall vibrancy of the city, though, we might argue that a city that's growing in population might be more vibrant and have more.
Maybe, but well, from what I'm hearing
Mhm.
from people living in Kobe, it's quite vibrant, quite internationally friendly,
Okay,
and quite a lot. People have actually compared it to Fukuoka on a number of occasions, so I think it's
okay.
definitely a good
So a
place to
couple of
live.
good
Yeah,
choices.
yeah,
Um, I
and it's
noticed, at
closer
least,
to a much more accessible international airport for people coming from the US, right?
that's true. Closer to international airport, and then the broader Kansai region. They have access to
Yeah,
Kyoto, Osaka, and
and it's
um,
smack in the middle of the country. If they want to get to
yeah,
Tokyo or Kyushu, it's not too much of a stretch.
yes, yeah, that's true. Very centrally located. Um, I was noticing on AkiyaMart too that it seems like within the price range that I put, that there are a lot more units around the Kobe area than around the Fukuoka area. Um,
Yeah, we see
I
that as
talked
well. Yeah.
I
Not just
talked
from
to
AkiyaMart. I mean, obviously they get their data from Japanese websites, and we see that
mhm.
as well.
Okay. Do you think that is because there's more inventory in Kobe, or that prices in Fukuoka are going up because of the popularity, or maybe both?
Prices might have something to do with it, but I think it's mainly the fact that Fukuoka is an investment hotspot. So properties get snatched very quickly here, and
Yeah.
there's not, I mean, there are many of them coming on the market, but many of them disappearing from the market equally as quickly. Kobe,
I
in
see.
that sense, is similar to Yokohama. It's a secondary market to Osaka, like Yokohama is a
Yeah.
secondary market to Tokyo. So
Hmm.
properties tend to stay on the market there a little bit longer. Fukuoka is the city in Kyushu. It's not secondary to
Yeah.
anything, so it's a lot more popular.
I
And the
see.
whole startup thing, the mayor's done a really good job at, pushing all the heavy industries and blue collar type jobs out of the city. Very much
Hmm.
startup-y, white collar professional services. It's just a very popular destination.
Okay. Yeah, there's no wrong choices. I think we should look at both of those options.
Yep, I agree.
And I think, I hear a lot of chatter online about both of them. Um, and then look at both condo options and house options and see where 20 million yen gets us the most value.
Well, with condos, I'd focus on first checking if we have any potential to even get something
Oh, like
within
anything
that
at
floor
all.
plan
Yeah.
that you're interested in
Hmm.
that would actually be open to monthly rentals. So if we hit too many walls when we start inquiring on those, we might
Hmm.
just decide to switch over to houses altogether.
Okay.
Unless, again, you can save another 20 million and buy a small building. They're not that expensive.
Yeah. Have have to ask for that Christmas bonus from wife's
From your
company.
boss at Japan remotely.
Yeah. Yeah. From all my customers. Come on, you got to get advice about Japan.
Actually, a GoFundMe page wouldn't be a bad idea for a project like that,
Yeah.
or a Kickstarter or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, a Kickstarter maybe. Yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, that could be interesting. But
And you'll have
as we
the media exposure, right? Like this guy trying this thing in Japan and
yeah,
crowdfunding it.
definitely apartment building is more of a splash. Um, but let's see what we come up with. And um, yeah, I think as a first start,
Kobe, Fukuoka, start with condos, see what we find with
start with
only
condo,
uni,
see what we
and
find.
then yeah.
It doesn't have to be a two-bedroom either. Um,
Yeah, but a reasonably sized dining kitchen
yeah.
area if you want
Hmm.
that to serve as a makeshift office, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So from a Japanese floor plan perspective, it's a 1 DK, I guess.
Hmm.
Maybe doable. I will need to make some inquiries. In Fukuoka, I know who to talk to. In Kobe, I will need to ask around. Give me some time. But we can
Okay.
definitely start that way and see how we go.
Yeah, that's great.
Awesome. So let's continue the conversation on email or WhatsApp, and we'll tee up again on Zoom to discuss our progress when we've got something to report.
Perfect. Thanks, Ziv.
Thanks for your time. Talk to you soon.
All right. Talk soon.
Bye.
So there you have it, the awesome Nick Woolsey from Japan Remotely. Check out his website and his presentation at the last Japan Real Estate Summit in this episode's show notes. And have a fantastic 3 weeks without me, most likely. I still might surprise myself and you and maybe publish another episode during that time. We'll see. But regardless of that, since you probably won't be getting another reminder about the summit here on the podcast in the next couple of weeks, and early bird tickets for the summit might not be available by then, it's a very good idea to go and secure your discounted tickets right now. Link again in this episode's show notes or on our website at nippontradings.com. Now, before we go, we're also, as always, going to tell you and also link to our other sponsor's website. That's Hiroshi Shimizu, immigration lawyer and administrative scrivener. If you're thinking about moving here on a more permanent basis, or you're already in Japan on some sort of a temporary visa and you want to switch to a longer term or permanent one, or if you're considering setting up a local company or a branch office of a foreign company and you've got any sort of business or visa related inquiries, or even if you just want to find out what your options are on any of these topics, feel free to contact Hiroshi Shimizu. You can find him at japanimmigrationexperts.com. and he can help you set up a company, apply for any kind of visa, or just provide you with the best advice and extremely affordable consultation related to these topics. And he's already done that for many of our listeners. So feel free to reach out to him. Again, that's japanimmigrationexperts.com, and you'll be well on your way. And that's it from us for today, folks. Hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Japan Real Estate Podcast. Do share it with your networks, and please let us know what you think. So leave us a short rating or review on the iTunes Store, on Spotify, or just drop us a line in the comment section of wherever you might have found this episode. We love hearing from you. Hope to have you with us again next time, and until then, have a great day or night ahead. Yoroshiku.